When I saw the small, iron-bound door in the far corner of our attic, I felt a chill I couldn't explain. My hands trembled, not with fear exactly, but with a kind of hesitation I hadn't known before. I had passed by that corner countless times over the years, but never lingered. My husband, David, had been very clear about it: don't open that room. Ever. I had laughed it off at first, thinking it was some private manly quirk, another one of his little mysteries. But after his death, the rules he set felt heavier, almost suffocating, like the very air in the house remembered him and his unspoken warnings. It had been 3 weeks since the funeral. The house was silent in a way that made me uncomfortable, not the soft, peaceful kind of quiet that follows a storm, but the kind that stretches and lingers, pressing against the walls. Every room smelled faintly of him: the leather of his armchair, his shaving cream, the faint musk of his cologne that still clung to his shirts in the closet. I wandered from room to room, touching objects almost compulsively, as though the contact could keep him with me a little longer. And yet, that attic door called to me in a way nothing else did. I remembered the day he'd installed the lock. I had been curious then, hovering behind him as he fitted the new latch. "David, what's in there?" I had asked. He had shrugged, that familiar crooked smile on his face. "Just some old junk. Nothing you need to worry about." "You're hiding something," I teased. "Maybe I am," he said softly, his tone turning serious, "but it's mine. Please, don't go in there." I had accepted his answer then, partly out of love, partly out of respect, and perhaps a bit because I was curious in a distant, teasing way. I had never imagined that someday I would stand before that door without him to stop me, heart-hammering as if I were a teenager sneaking into forbidden territory. I knelt in front of it now, tracing my fingers along the iron edge. The lock clicked in my mind the way the old grandfather clock ticked down in the living room. I had to open it. I had to know. Part of me wanted to leave it alone, leave the past untouched, but grief has a way of twisting logic. The need to understand him, all of him, had become a kind of hunger. The key was still in the little tin box he kept in his dresser, the one labeled "Do Not Touch." I hesitated before retrieving it, holding it in my palm as if it were the key to some secret life I had never been allowed to share. My fingers shook as I slid it into the lock. It turned easily, almost too easily, as if it had been waiting for me all along. The door creaked open, and a wave of dust and cold air hit me, like the house itself was exhaling after years of holding its breath. The room was small, dim, and musty, lined with shelves I had never seen. My eyes adjusted slowly, revealing boxes stacked neatly, each labeled with dates, initials, and places I didn't recognize. A low hum of the attic fan was the only sound, aside from the whisper of my own breathing. I stepped inside, the floorboards groaning under my weight, and my hands brushed against the first box. Inside were letters, photographs, and small trinkets that seemed utterly mundane at first glance. But as I looked closer, I realized these were not things from our life together. These were pieces of another world, a life David had kept completely separate. There were letters from a woman I didn't know, photographs of him in places I had never been, smiling with people I had never met. A letter fell from the top of a box, and I picked it up with trembling hands. His handwriting, elegant, deliberate, intimate. My stomach dropped as I read the first few lines, the words dripping with affection, a tenderness I had never witnessed from him. I stumbled back, clutching the letter as if it were a burning brand. My mind raced. This couldn't be real. He had always been devoted, attentive, and loving, the kind of husband every woman dreams of. And yet, here was proof of a secret I had never suspected. My knees buckled, and I sank to the floor, the air around me thick with dust and disbelief. How could he live 2 lives? How could the man I kissed every night, who whispered my name in the dark, have hidden an entire existence? My chest ached with betrayal, but beneath it, a deeper, colder current ran: curiosity. I had to know everything. I spent hours in that attic, surrounded by pieces of David I had never known. Each box told a story, and with every letter, photograph, or receipt I pulled out, the picture of the man I thought I knew shattered a little more. There were travel tickets to cities I had never heard him mention, dinners with people whose names were scribbled in shorthand he never used around me, and gifts addressed to someone else, always with the same initials, LM. I remembered the subtle oddities now, flashes I had brushed off at the time. The way he sometimes came home smelling faintly of jasmine, a scent I associated with spring air, not perfume. The occasional late-night phone calls he took in the bathroom, whispers muffled through the wall. The way he sometimes seemed lost in thought, staring at me, smiling yet not really seeing me. I had chalked it up to stress at work or the fatigue of age. Now it all made sense, and it hurt in a way I couldn't have anticipated. I opened a leather-bound journal and saw a side of him I had never imagined. His words were raw and alive, describing mundane moments and profound emotions, but they were never about me. They were about her, LM. Every page dripped with longing, secrecy, and devotion, and my heart pounded as I turned each one. My fingers trembled. I wanted to scream, to throw the book across the room, but I couldn't stop reading. One photograph caught my eye. It was David, smiling in a park I didn't recognize, holding a child, a little girl, maybe 5 years old, with his eyes and that same crooked smile. My throat tightened, and my hands shook as I stared. I had known my husband loved children, I had seen him with nieces, his nephews, and neighborhood kids. But this was different. This child was his. My mind raced, trying to reconcile the image with the life we had built together. Had he had her during our marriage? Before? Was she alive? Was she safe? My stomach churned with confusion, betrayal, and a deep, gnawing worry I couldn't name. I sank into the corner of the room, the letter clutched to my chest, and cried. Not loud, not theatrical, just the quiet, shaking sobs of a woman whose foundation had been quietly pulled from under her. The grief wasn't just for David, it was for the life we had shared, for the trust one had placed so completely in him, and for the realization that I had been living beside a man whose heart had been divided all along. Hours passed. I didn't move, didn't eat, didn't call anyone. The attic became my confessional, my prison, and my awakening all at once. And then I found it, a folder labeled Will and Arrangements. My hands hesitated as I opened it, dreading what I might discover. Inside were detailed instructions, accounts to be opened, assets to be distributed, and references to LM and her child. David had planned everything meticulously. He hadn't intended for me to discover this. The room blurred around me as the weight of it sank in. My husband, the man I had loved, had kept a whole family, a whole life, hidden from me. I felt anger, betrayal, and heartbreak collide inside me, and yet beneath it all, there was a strange, unsettling respect. He had cared for them, protected them, and ensured they would be provided for. He had lived 2 lives without neglecting either, and that was something I had never anticipated. I realized I couldn't remain silent. My children needed to know, and I needed to confront the truth for myself. But how? How could I speak of this without shattering their image of their father, without unraveling the delicate threads of our family? I paced the attic, clutching a box of letters, weighing every possible step. The house felt suffocating, every wall pressing in with memories of a man I thought I knew. Finally, I knew I had no choice. I had to step into his hidden world, even if it meant exposing the lies, even if it meant facing the betrayal head-on. The first step was understanding why he had done this, why he had hidden, and why he had loved me in spite of it. I had to be careful, methodical, and strong. For the sake of truth, for the sake of my children, for the sake of closure. I decided to start with the letters. Carefully, I pulled out each one, reading the dates, the small details, and the cadence of his words. It was like holding a ghost in my hands, a version of David I had never known. LM wrote back sometimes, and the words were tender, intimate, almost unbearably warm. I could feel the way he had leaned into this other life, how he had balanced 2 worlds, how he had made choices that I could never have imagined. The first clue that made my stomach twist had come long ago, I realized. A birthday card, unsigned, that arrived at the office address I didn't know he had. I had assumed it was a work-related card. Another clue had been the small, perfectly wrapped gift he had left on the porch last Christmas, claiming it was for a friend. Now it all connected, each piece a thread that led me here. And yet, despite my hurt, there was still the man I knew, tender, loving, protective. How could someone hold such contradiction without breaking? I heard a creak behind me and froze. The attic was silent again, except for the hum of the fan and the whisper of the dust stirred by my movements. I realized I wasn't just discovering him, I was discovering myself. My marriage, my trust, my sense of reality, everything was under scrutiny. How long had I been blind? How many times had I ignored signs, convincing myself of the narrative I wanted to believe? Then came the photograph I could not put down. The little girl, her smile mirrored his, her hair the same dark waves. I needed answers. I needed to know if she had been born before our marriage, during, or after. My heart pounded, a mix of fear, anger, and maternal instinct. How could he have carried this secret without a single word? I decided to trace the letters, the addresses, and the postmarks. Each envelope led me further into his hidden life. I discovered a neighborhood I had never visited, a school where he had enrolled her for lessons, a small circle of people who knew him as a devoted father. He had been living this parallel life quietly, discreetly, without harming anyone, without causing scandal. And yet, for me, the betrayal was visceral. The foundation of my world, the man I had built a life with, had been only partially mine. I had to confront it. I couldn't stay locked in the attic with the secret anymore. I carried the letters down the narrow staircase, my fingers shaking with anticipation and dread. The house felt different now, hollowed out by the absence of the man who had always been its pulse. Each room was heavy with memories of laughter, arguments, quiet mornings with coffee, and nights curled up together. And now, all of it seemed fragile, a carefully constructed illusion. I sat at the kitchen table, the letters spread before me like evidence, and I tried to breathe. The smell of brewed coffee from that morning, David's favorite blend, lingered faintly in the air, and I realized I hadn't truly noticed the small rituals that had bound us. The tenderness of him pouring cream into my cup, the gentle teasing over burnt toast, the way he would hum while preparing breakfast. Those little details were real. They were still real. But they were no longer the whole truth. I found myself whispering his name, almost as if calling him back could undo the betrayal. "David, why?" I asked, my voice catching. The house answered with silence. And in that silence, I understood the impossibility of the question. He was gone. The only way forward was through understanding, through uncovering the full scope of his secret life, through reconciling the man I had loved with the man he had been. The first step was finding LM, finding his daughter, understanding the life he had nurtured without me. And the second was understanding why he had kept it hidden, the choices, the fears, the devotion that had led him to live two lives without allowing them to collide. I felt a strange mixture of fear and resolve. I could no longer ignore what was before me. I spent the next few days piecing together the fragments of his hidden world. Every address, every name, every scribbled note led me deeper into a story I had never been allowed to be part of. And then I found it, a small, suburban home tucked between identical beige houses, the mailbox labeled L. Matthews. My heart hammered as I realized this was the first physical link to the life David had kept secret from me. I parked a few blocks away, sitting in the car, hands gripping the steering wheel. I felt absurd, like a stranger spying on a life that was, in some ways, rightfully mine to uncover, but also entirely foreign. Should I knock? Should I leave a note? Should I retreat and let it remain a secret, just as he had wanted? I thought of my children, of the years of honesty and trust one had tried to build in our family. They deserved to know, deserved to understand their father fully, even if it was painful. I finally gathered my courage and walked to the door. Each step felt heavier than the last. I rang the bell, the chime echoing in my chest, and waited. The door opened slowly, revealing a woman in her 40s, her eyes wary but kind. "Hello," she asked cautiously. "I'm sorry to intrude," I began, my voice shaking. "My name is Maria." I knew David. Her eyes softened slightly, recognition flickering. "David, he spoke of you sometimes. Please, come in." I stepped inside, the house warm and inviting, a contrast to the storm raging inside me. Photos lined the walls, pictures of David and the little girl, smiles frozen in time. I recognized the crooked grin, the way the girl's eyes mirrored his. My throat tightened. This was real. He had truly lived a double life. We sat at her kitchen table, and she poured tea with careful hands. Her daughter, a little girl of 7, shyly peered around the corner, curiosity and caution in her eyes. I wanted to reach out, to scoop her into my arms, but I restrained myself. This was not my place, not yet. "I know this is difficult," LM said gently. "David, he loved us. He loved you, too. That's the thing you have to understand. He didn't mean to hurt anyone. He was trying to protect everyone he cared about." Her words hit me like a physical blow. I wanted to scream, to demand why he had lied, why he had chosen secrecy over honesty. But all I could do was sit, shaking, and listen. I asked about the little girl. Her name was Emily. She was David's daughter, my husband's child. My stomach turned, not with anger this time, but with a profound sadness. He had given her life, nurtured her, loved her fiercely, and I had been oblivious, sleeping in the same bed, sharing the same meals, laughing at the same jokes. LM handed me a photo album. I flipped through it carefully, each image a testament to David's other life. Birthday parties, school recitals, little drawings he had kept from Emily, all of it filled with the warmth and care I had always associated with our marriage, but directed elsewhere. And yet, the more I looked, the more I realized the heart that loved Emily was the same heart that had loved me. He had compartmentalized, yes, but he had never stopped being devoted, even in our marriage. I felt tears blur my vision, tears of grief, tears of anger, tears of confusion. I had loved him with everything I had, and yet I had only ever loved part of him. And still, there was no denying the tenderness in his choices. He had protected us all. He had done the impossible, loved 2 lives with honesty to each of them in his own way, even if he had failed to share the whole truth with me. The room was quiet, except for Emily's soft laughter as she drew at the kitchen table, and I realized how small and human we all were in the face of love and mistakes. There was no villain here, only humans trying, faltering, hurting, and protecting. I left their house with a heavy heart and a complicated mind. David's secrets had been laid bare, his life split between 2 families, and I had finally seen the truth. The betrayal still stung, sharp and raw, but beneath it, a strange kind of understanding began to bloom. People are flawed, I realized. Love is messy. And sometimes, the ones we think we know best are carrying worlds we cannot imagine. When I returned home that evening, the house felt emptier than ever. Every familiar corner seemed to echo with David's absence, and with the absence of the life I had thought I knew. I sat at the kitchen table, the weight of the day pressing down on me, and tried to make sense of everything. My hands still shook from meeting Emily, from seeing the proof of my husband's hidden world. I felt a strange mixture of grief, anger, and something close to awe. He had carried so much for so long. I knew I had to act carefully. I couldn't simply storm into my children's lives and dump this truth on them. They were young, and their image of their father was pure, idealized. I wanted them to understand him, to understand that people are complicated, that love and mistakes often coexist. I needed a plan, a way to reveal the truth without destroying the innocence of the life they had known. I started by organizing the letters and photographs I had brought home. I cataloged everything, dates, addresses, correspondences, gifts, all the evidence of his double life. I created a folder for LM and Emily, carefully separating it from the other letters and journals. I needed clarity before I could speak to anyone, before I could bring this hidden world into the light. Then came the confrontation, not with anger, but with honesty. I called my oldest child into the living room, a quiet corner where the light fell softly over the furniture. My heart ached as I looked at their curious face, so trusting, so innocent. "I have something important to tell you," I began, my voice trembling but controlled. "It's about your father." The child's brow furrowed. "What is it, Mom?" I took a deep breath, remembering every detail I had just learned. "Your father, he had another family. A little girl, your half-sister, and a woman who loved him deeply. He kept it a secret, and I only discovered it recently." The words hung in the air, heavy and shocking. I watched as comprehension flickered across their face, confusion, disbelief, and finally, a quiet, aching sorrow. "Why would he do that?" they whispered. "I don't know exactly," I admitted, tears pricking my eyes. "But I think he loved them. And he loved us. He made choices to protect everyone, even if it meant keeping secrets. People are complicated. Love is complicated. And sometimes, even the ones we trust most make decisions we can't understand." We spent hours talking, going over what I knew, answering their questions as best I could. I was careful not to demonize him. I wanted them to remember him as the man they loved, even if he had flaws, even if he had hurt us in ways we hadn't imagined. The room was filled with grief, yes, but also with the beginnings of understanding. Afterward, I reached out to LM again. We agreed that Emily could meet my children slowly, in small, gentle steps, so that their worlds could merge without shattering. I wanted this to be about connection, about healing, not blame. I wanted my children to see that family can be complex, that love can stretch across boundaries we never imagined. Through this process, I began to take small steps toward closure. I cleaned the attic, organizing the boxes of letters and photographs into neat stacks. I didn't destroy them, they were part of David, part of history, part of truth. I filed them away in a cabinet, a silent testament to the life he had hidden, and a reminder of the lesson I had learned, that human hearts are vast, and secrets, even when painful, are often rooted in love. At night, when the house was quiet and I could hear only the tick of the clock and the soft hum of the refrigerator, I would sit in David's old armchair, holding one of his letters, and reflect. I felt the sting of betrayal, yes, but I also felt gratitude for the chance to understand, to forgive, and to see the depth of his love, even if it had been imperfectly expressed. When the story inevitably reached the ears of our extended family and close friends, the ripple effect was immediate. Conversations halted when my name was mentioned, and eyes flickered toward me with unspoken questions. Some looked at me with sympathy, others with suspicion, and a few with outright judgment. I had anticipated this, and yet nothing prepared me for the quiet weight of their curiosity and, in some cases, blame. I chose to control the narrative as much as I could. I called my siblings one evening, inviting them over, and laid out the truth calmly. I didn't sugarcoat anything, but I didn't let anger or betrayal dominate my words either. David had another family, I began, watching their expressions carefully. A daughter and a woman he loved. He didn't tell us, and I found out only after his death. He made mistakes, yes. But he loved all of us in his own complicated way. Silence followed. My sister, who always had a sharp tongue, finally spoke. "Why didn't he tell anyone?" she asked, her voice steady but tinged with disbelief. "I think he was afraid," I replied softly. "Afraid of hurting anyone. He wanted to protect everyone he cared about. That doesn't make it right, but it helps me understand why." Words spread slowly, and the responses were mixed. Some family members offered support, helping me navigate the logistics of contacting LM, arranging for my children to meet Emily, and even assisting with some of David's financial matters that had been entangled between the two households. Others withdrew, unable to reconcile the image of the man they had known with the secret he had kept. In the community, whispers followed. Friends I had invited over for casual dinners began asking probing questions. I noticed the subtle change in tone, the way conversations veered toward curiosity about David's other life. And yet, I also saw compassion, the quiet recognition that humans are complex, and sometimes love comes with shadows. Through all of this, I learned something profound about consequence and legacy. David's choices, while hidden, did not erase the life he built with me or the love he had for our children. His other life didn't diminish our memories, our laughter, or the warmth of his presence in our home. But it did create a moral reckoning, a reminder that honesty, even when difficult, is essential to the foundation of trust. I met with LM a few times after the initial encounter, each meeting carefully orchestrated to allow the children to interact gradually. Emily and my children were cautious at first, wary of each other's presence, but over time, laughter began to fill rooms where tension had once lingered. It was not a perfect integration, and there were setbacks, tears, arguments, confusion, but there was progress. Through these public and semi-public encounters, I discovered resilience I hadn't known I possessed. I learned to hold my grief alongside my understanding, my anger alongside my empathy, and my heartbreak alongside the recognition that human beings are capable of both profound mistakes and profound love. The moral consequence, I realized, was not punishment, but clarity. The world now knew the truth, and the truth, as painful as it was, allowed healing to begin. I saw people grappling with their perceptions of David, and in their struggle, I found solidarity. We were all learning that the heart is rarely simple, and the legacy of love is often intertwined with the lessons of imperfection. And as the initial shock settled, as the murmurs of gossip quieted, I felt a kind of peace begin to take root, not the peace of forgetting, but the peace of understanding, of acknowledging the full spectrum of human complexity, and choosing compassion in the face of betrayal. Slowly, life began to settle into a new rhythm. The house, once heavy with secrets and the echoes of a husband I had thought I knew completely, felt lighter. The attic door, which had once seemed like a portal to a hidden world, now stood as a testament, a reminder of truth, of the complexity of love, and of the resilience required to move forward. I focused on my children first. We developed our own small rituals to honor David's memory while acknowledging the other side of his life. Sometimes we looked through old photographs together, talking about memories, and at other times, we spoke gently of Emily, of the sister they had gained, teaching them empathy, patience, and understanding. It wasn't always easy, jealousy, confusion, and grief flared up unpredictably, but step by step, we built bridges rather than walls. I also made the decision to keep a connection with LM and Emily, not out of obligation, but because it felt right. I wanted my children to see that families can expand, that love is not a zero-sum game, and that mistakes don't have to define relationships. Over time, the shared dinners, small outings, and quiet conversations became familiar, weaving the lives that David had once separated into a cautious, yet meaningful, unity. For myself, healing was more intimate and internal. I spent long evenings in the garden, the air crisp with early autumn, reflecting on the life I had lived with David and the life I had uncovered afterward. There were days when anger surged, and I allowed myself to sit with it, to acknowledge the betrayal. But I also recognized that harboring resentment would only anchor me in the past. Forgiveness, or at least acceptance, became my way forward, not for him, but for me and the children I loved. I found solace in small, tangible routines, making breakfast for the children, walking in the quiet of the morning, writing letters I would never send. These acts grounded me, reminding me that life is built not only on love but on perseverance, reflection, and courage. I learned that grief is not a straight line, it is jagged, uneven, and personal, and it cannot be rushed. And yet, through this pain and reflection, I also found gratitude. I was grateful for the lessons David's secrets had forced upon me, lessons in empathy, patience, and moral complexity. I was grateful that his other family existed safely, that they had known love and care, and that our lives, though complicated, could eventually intersect with kindness. In the quiet evenings, I sometimes held one of David's letters in my hand, tracing the familiar loops of his handwriting, feeling a strange tenderness. I didn't hate him. I didn't resent him completely. I simply recognized the imperfect human heart that had shaped so much of my life, a heart capable of love, deception, and profound devotion all at once. Through this, I began to understand a simple truth: life is rarely fair, love is rarely simple, and trust is a fragile, precious thing. But even amidst betrayal and hidden worlds, healing is possible, empathy is possible, and new beginnings can emerge from the most unexpected places. As I sit here now, the house quiet around me, I often think about the choices we make, the ones we share openly and the ones we hide, believing we are protecting the people we love. I've learned that love is not simple. It doesn't always follow the rules we set for it. And yet, it endures, sometimes in unexpected, imperfect ways. I think about my children, about Emily, about LM, and about David. I think about the lessons hidden in all of this, that people are rarely purely good or evil, that mistakes do not erase the love we give or receive, and that healing is always possible when we approach the truth with courage and compassion. I have come to understand that forgiveness is not about excusing the past, it's about freeing yourself from its hold so you can move forward. Sometimes, I still open the attic door. I don't need to look through the boxes anymore, the knowledge they hold has settled into me. But standing there, I feel a strange connection to the man I loved, to the secret he carried, and to the intricate web of relationships that defined his life. I feel sadness, yes, but also a quiet peace, a sense that I have faced the truth and emerged stronger, wiser, and more compassionate than I was before. Life goes on. My children laugh, Emily, and they are slowly learning the gentle art of siblinghood, and I have found solace in the small, tender routines that once felt mundane but now feel like anchors. The house smells of coffee in the mornings, toast burning lightly in the oven, and the faint musk of old books and memories. It is warm. It is ours. I leave you with this thought: sometimes, the people we love carry secrets that shake the foundation of our lives. The choice we have is not whether to forgive, but how, with bitterness, or with understanding. How do you confront the truth when it hurts the most? How do you reconcile love with betrayal? Would you have opened the door if it had been forbidden to you? Would you have faced the secrets, or let them remain hidden? Think about it, and tell me in the comments. Because in the end, the measure of a life well lived is not the perfection of the story, but the courage to face its truths.